Hey guys, it's Dean. Welcome back to the Better Man podcast. Today I'm joined by Adam Sudd. He is a nutritional and behavioral health expert. He has a really incredible story that he's going to share with us, and he is now advisor to many really, really, really special people. I don't know how else to say it, but he'll tell you about that, and I'm really excited to have him on. So, Adam, thank you for joining me.
Oh man, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to have this conversation. Dean, thank you so much for bringing me on.
Yeah. So, and I told you before at the beginning of the call, but Adam is vegan, and so he's going to be my vegan ambassador for the day. I'm going to ask him all the questions about veganism that most of us have, and help us clear up some misconceptions, and maybe help understand how we can do a
Yeah,
vegan diet better. But you're big. A few years ago, before you got into this, you were 150 pounds heavier.
yeah. So back in 2012, I was at my heaviest. Then I was around 350 pounds at the time, and
Yeah.
it was quite an ordeal. I mean, I was dealing with a lot of things then. I was dealing with substance use disorder. I was dealing with food addiction. I was dealing with depression, anxiety, and several chronic health conditions that I didn't know that I had. They hadn't been diagnosed at the time.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's so many things that you were going through then, and then you decided you were going to turn things around, and you decided you were gonna focus on 3 things, right?
Yeah. So interestingly, in 2012, on August 21st of 2012, that was like my turning point. We could talk about it later. We'll get into it. I'll do a quick backstory here.
Yeah.
I suffered and struggled with substance use disorder, which is what is the accurate terminology for addiction.
Mhm.
I was abusing stimulants, I was abusing opiates, and I was abusing food. Uh, and by August 21st, 2012, my life had just become too painful a place to want to show up and be present for. It didn't feel like a safe, secure, or hopeful place to be, and my future felt like an increasingly more unsafe, unsecure, and painful place to be. And when you live in that reality long enough, tomorrow is just something you just don't want to be a part of. So I attempted to suicide on August 21st, 2012. I survived, and I checked into a rehab facility within 2 weeks of that. And within the first 72 hours of rehab, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, erectile dysfunction, chemically induced bipolar disorder, suicidal depression, anxiety disorder, sleep disorder,
Oh
attention
my
deficit
gosh.
disorder, and obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And I was
Wow.
put on a cabinet's worth of medication for life. That was the intention. And the whole time I was being emphasized, you have got to stop using drugs. The only way for your life to get better is if you can focus every day around the attention of just don't use again. And I don't know why, but it rubbed me the wrong way.
Mhm.
I decided what I wanted to do and what I was going to set on a quest to do was to intentionally redesign, kind of reverse engineer the experience of feeling fully alive. What I wanted to do was be the architect of a life that felt like such a hopeful, exciting, and safe place to be. That by doing so, use would be less necessary and life would be more of a place that I wanted to show up and be present for. So I spent the better part of the next year intentionally reorganizing my caloric environment, my physical environment, my social environment, with the help of therapy and other modalities.
Mhm.
Within 5 months, the diabetes, the heart disease, the erectile dysfunction were completely reversed. Within
Wow.
10 months, I'd lost over 100 pounds. Within a year, I was off of all of my medications, including my psych meds, my antidepressants, mood stabilizers, sleep medications, anxiety medications. And I found that I had figured out how to, for the first time ever, seemed like I figured out how to, with ease and repeatability, design a life that I wanted to show up and be present for every single day.
Mm.
That I had been able to reestablish the loving and meaningful bonds, those valuable and meaningful bonds that give us the experience of feeling fully alive. I've been able to reconnect to those. And now my life felt like a place I wanted to be a part of without using. And it wasn't through the intentional abstinence of use, it was through the intentional reorganization of my life.
Mm.
So now I've been in recovery for 11 years. I went back to school to study nutrition. I started to help people use nutrition as a vehicle for reestablishing themselves and reconnecting themselves to a life that they wanted to be present for. And then last year, published the very first controlled trial investigating the effects of nutrition on early addiction recovery outcomes in treatment centers. And
Mhm.
it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, I remember. I usually like to tell people about how we met. So I met you at Jeremy Hill's gym. It's called Oh God, why?
Collective.
The Collective, which is this
Yeah.
really cool. It's called a social performance club.
It is the coolest
Um,
place in the world.
but it is a unique concept for a gym. By the way, it's not just like a gym where you go and show up and work out. This guy also trains NFL, like the top NFL
Yeah.
combines. He's pointing out like that's John Morant's trainer over there, and
Yeah.
like I'm just
And
like,
oh, and there's Bijan
what?
Robinson just like,
Oh
pushing
yeah,
sleds, you know?
right, yeah. So like there's like, there's NFL athletes, there's NBA athletes here just hanging out, working out, and you're like, dude, what is he just doing here working out?
I know.
So anyways, I met Adam there, and he told me you were really excited about you're getting this paper published, and it was kind of like the culmination of in many ways it was like a culmination of the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So that's really awesome. And as you were kind of going through what you were just saying, with you're kind of introducing yourself, there were two things that really stuck out to me. But most people I think would say like, I had issues with food, I ate too much food, but
Yeah.
you kind of reframe that as like, this is substance abuse. Like, this is not just
Yeah.
eating too much food. This is substance abuse. This is like, you know,
Yeah.
and I also like how you shifted the mindset of, I just have to avoid drugs, to I need to figure out how I can live a full life. And as you were saying that, I was also thinking like, well, how can they, I'm sure that treatment centers know what they're doing, and I understand, and they're like, okay, we need to avoid drugs, but at the same time, they're saying avoid drugs, but then they're also giving you drugs, right? They're like saying like, you have to
Well,
be on drugs for the rest of your life. Not to say that
yeah.
like, not to say that you probably, they were probably very helpful, but
Yeah. I think it's
like,
it's so important to understand that, when I checked into treatment, I was in an incredibly dysregulated state, and in fact, a lot of the medications that I was given in the short term
mhm,
allowed me to be able to approach behavior change in an effective way. My issue with a lot of what you see in treatment is that those medications are prescribed to an individual with the intention of them using it forever.
mm,
And that can be detrimental. We know that there's long-term side effects to a lot of these medications. So in the acute onset of these conditions, they can be beneficial.
mhm,
But there has to be an intentional approach to saying what this is an opportunity for you to be able to start to organize other tools into your life. And if you organize them appropriately and you approach them accurately, what's going to be able to take place is over the course of time, we're going to be able to appropriately remove these medications.
mm,
And I think that that approach is a much more valuable approach. I understand how difficult that approach is because of the amount of care required to facilitate the need of behavior change to that degree.
mm,
But that's something I did not want to be on medications forever. I at the time I got really angry.
yeah,
Anger is a great motivator. It's a great
mhm,
motivator for short term change. Really lets you know, hey, you've got something that's important to you that you want to do. I tell people negative consequences don't motivate long term change. What negative consequences do is they let you know that there's something really important in your life, something incredibly meaningful in your life that is being threatened.
mhm,
And what you have to do is you have to identify what that loving and meaningful and important thing or things are in your life and use those as motivation for long term change.
mm,
Like let them direct you towards what you need to do, not what you need to not do. Right? A lot of recovery is like stop doing that, stop doing this, avoid that. Well, that's great, but if you're not also being directed towards accurate replacements,
mm,
it's just a passive action.
mhm,
It doesn't really incentivize change in an effective way.
mhm. Yeah, and I don't want to compare changing habits to addiction, but part of when we look at habit change, you're not, the best way it's really hard to just eliminate a habit.
Yes.
It's really hard to stop doing a bad habit. It's really hard to it's not really hard to start doing a good habit. If the habit is effective, it's really hard to stop it, just because it's
Yeah.
kind of like an automatic behavior. So instead of eliminating it, the better strategy is to figure out, how can I figure out a replacement behavior? How can I look at the action that I take in this habit and replace it with a similar action that leads to a similar result, but doesn't have the negative long-term health effects of
Yeah.
this quote unquote bad habit? One question that I'm curious about, and this is something that I really like exploring on this podcast, but it's, how did you go about thinking how to reorganize your life?
Yeah.
How did you rediscover your values? What was the process for that?
So that's a really great question, and I really love talking about this topic. About a year before I went into a treatment facility, I had the opportunity to hear a man named Rip Esselstyn give a lecture. And Rip Esselstyn is a New York Times bestselling author. He's actually the son of Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, is one of the premier, very, very famous cardiologists. He was actually the cardiologist along with Dr. Dean Ornish, who helped Bill Clinton reverse his cardiovascular disease. And he had written a book called Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, and they'd been featured in a film at the time called Forks Over Knives.
Mhm.
And he's from Austin, and I got dragged to this thing by my dad. I was 350 pounds. I was a mess, and my dad was just like, maybe this will help. Maybe this will inspire him. And
Mm.
to be honest, I'd never heard of Rip Esselstyn. I didn't know who he was. I didn't want to know who he was. I sure as shit didn't want to know what a plant-based diet was. But that's what he was talking about. He was talking about the intentional use of a specific dietary protocol that could allow people with ease and repeatability to tackle some very difficult things in their life. Primarily, he was talking about cardiovascular disease and obesity,
Mhm.
but it also related to diabetes health. And at the time, I didn't know that I was sick. I mean, let's be clear, it was pretty obvious I was, but I was in a pretty big state of denial. And so when I was receiving these diagnoses from this doctor, it was almost like I was transported back to this retreat where here's the reality, man. I was eating 5,000 calories of fast food a day
Mm.
for about 2 weeks. Once that ended, that would only end because I would get enough stimulants that I could abuse for about another 7 days straight without sleeping or eating. And to put it into perspective, my main drug of choice was Adderall.
Mm.
And the average prescription for Adderall is about 20 milligrams for every 24 hours. I was doing a minimum of 450 milligrams, upwards of 1,000 milligrams a day for 7 consecutive days.
Wow.
So my life was simply one form of self abuse followed by another, simply in the attempt to, with the greatest ease and repeatability, escape a life that was too painful a place to be,
Mm.
that I didn't want to be a part of. So I was sitting in that chair and I heard all this stuff and it was like, wait a minute, hang on. I clearly have no idea how to eat in any kind of self care manner.
Mm.
I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know any other way to do it. The only thing I could remember was I heard this guy say, this might do it for you. So I said, I've got nothing to lose here. Why don't I just try this thing out for the next 30 days? I said, I I don't know anything about mental health at the time. I certainly didn't know anything about addiction. And focusing on those things was really difficult for me because it didn't seem like A plus B equaled C. But with
Mhm.
nutrition, it really did. If I did this and I added that, I would get this result. And that's the kind of system that I needed. And the other thing that took place was I came across a guy, his name is Doug Lisle. He's an evolutionary psychologist. And evolutionary psychology speaks to the psychological and motivational architecture that kind of drives human and animal behavior. So he answers a very, very important question, which is why, if we know what to do to be happy and healthy, why is it so difficult to do it?
Mm.
Evolutionary psychology really does answer that question pretty effectively. And so, what I wanted to do was build a system of change upon plant based nutrition and evolutionary psychology and move forward with that for simply 30 days and just be like, I'm just going to run this experiment. All I want to know is if I do this thing, will it help me? Will my life become better? After those 30 days, I want to figure out if it shows positive results. I want to figure out how to do the same thing with a little bit greater ease and a little bit greater repeatability.
Mhm.
You mentioned about habit change is simply not the removal of your old habits, but the replacement of your old habit with a new habit that gets you a similar result.
Mhm.
That's true. The factor that's going to allow you to sustainably keep that habit in your life is the degree of ease and repeatability that the new habit has.
Mhm.
It has to cost you as little time and energy as your old habit, or you're going to go back to your old habits more often than you want. It's simple evolutionary psychology. Every instinct in you is trying to get the most amount of pleasure for the least amount of pain and least amount of energy. You have a psychological and motivational architecture that is trying to get the most for the least. So
Mhm.
if your new habits are just too much time and energy, you're going to feel overwhelmed. You're going to feel stressed. So I had to figure out how to do it
Right.
with ease and repeatability. So that's what kind of drove me towards. I didn't know what to do. I found a system that was basically just like eat, rice, beans, greens,
Mhm.
veggies, and fruits. I figured out a way to do it where it took me no more than 10 minutes per meal to make it.
Mhm.
I lived in that environment long enough. And as a result of living in that environment, I noticed my health returning. And I
Mhm.
said, oh, that's really motivating. Day one is inspiration. You got to put in some time and energy in order to get motivated. You got to see, you got to get a sense that what you're doing is leading you in the direction that you want to go. By day 30, I was incredibly motivated to repeat that experiment. I'm like, this is amazing. I've lost
Mhm.
like 40 pounds. My blood pressure is normalized. My blood glucose is like, I mean, oh my gosh, I'm starting to come off medications. I'm so motivated to run this experiment again. And I just
Mm.
kept running that experiment for 10 months. It was phenomenal.
Yeah. So, what were the big change? You talked about the physical changes that you
Yeah.
noticed. Before you were talking about the intentional reorganization of your life,
Yeah.
um, and to go from this place of I don't want to live anymore to
Mhm.
okay, things are getting better now. What kind of realizations did you go through in terms of like recognizing, hey, my life is worth living. Like this is important to me. Was it just that you were now becoming healthier and in weight loss, or like what else were you
Yeah.
discovering in that process?
So to answer that question, we have to actually go back to the day that I tried to suicide.
Hmm.
So that was like, as I mentioned, that was August 21st of 2012. And it's really important to recognize that up until that point, I had a very difficult childhood. I was bullied. I mean, terribly bullied,
Mm,
physically, emotionally. I experienced a lot of criticism about my body from my parents, not intentionally. It was just kind of like the way that they communicated.
hmm.
And so I spent a significant amount of my life feeling like my body wasn't a safe, secure place to be,
Hmm.
feeling like sometimes in the presence of my own home wasn't a safe and secure place to be, even though I had the greatest parents in the world. And certainly being at school didn't feel like a safe and secure place to be. In fact, it felt like a very dangerous place to be. And so I discovered drug use in high school because drug use seemed to solve almost every one of those problems with unbelievable ease, unbelievable repeatability, in incredibly profound ways. I was able to uh, gain unbelievable confidence with the use of stimulants. I was able to stop being bullied and harmed by giving away some of my stimulants to the kids that were beating me up.
Mm,
It allowed me to lose weight and have a physical appearance that made people attracted to me, made my parents excited about me. I was able to engage in study habits in a way that seemed to make my parents proud. So it seemed to solve some of the most overwhelming problems I'd ever faced. And this is really important. When you're living in a life that is painful, when you're living in a life where when you wake up, it doesn't feel like a place that you want to be a part of, that you want to be present for, that seems like a scary place to be. And drug use, any kind of drug use or behavior like gambling or sex or whatever it is, seems to pacify the passage of time so that your life can be something you can deal with. You have
mm,
to understand for that person that their use looks and feels exactly like self care. It
mm,
makes complete sense. Unfortunately, you're going to reach a point in time where that substance or that behavior starts to disorder your life. And that's
mhm,
where substance use disorder comes in. So, yes, people abuse substances all the time. That doesn't mean they're suffering from a disorder. Substance use disorder is characterized at the point where the use has become so overwhelming that it has disordered your ability to live in a healthy way, either at work or at home or in multiple facets of your life that are important. So, by the time I was in college and dropped out of college, it had become a full blown disorder.
mm,
And for the next 10 years, it would continue to disorder my life. And this is really an interesting and tricky thing because, from my perspective and from my psychology, it looks and feels like, oh my gosh, this was the greatest thing I'd ever found. It fully made me and my life feel for the first time like this was the way it's supposed to be. Now all of a sudden it's leading me in the wrong direction. That doesn't make sense.
mm,
You have no idea how successful this was. How could what was once the greatest solution in my life be becoming the most overwhelming problem I'd ever faced? And it's too difficult to let go of. It's very difficult to talk about it because right now, at this time, I was over 300 pounds. I had lost jobs. I was starting to live like a hoarder. People were noticing that I wasn't a person they wanted around. So at this point, if I was to say, hey, guys, also, you should know, I'm also really struggling with drug use. The fear is if they knew that, that might be the last straw that says, I don't want anything to do with you. I
Mm.
don't want to have anything to do with you. So you intentionally hide it. There's a stigma, there's a shame. And enough of that life becomes something you just don't want to be a part of. And that's what happened to me. And what I thought I was trying to do on August 21st of 2012 was I thought I was trying to end my life. And I remember what it felt like when I intentionally overdosed. I remember the feeling sitting on the couch. I've been abusing substances for over 10 years. Overdoses wasn't something I was new to, but this felt distinctly different. I felt like I was gonna like kind of throw up. I felt sick. I got all sweaty, and I tried to stand up off of my couch, and my entire right side of my body cramped. Felt like I got stabbed in the right side with a hot knife. And as I buckled over, black just rushes in, and I'd never experienced anything like that. And I'll tell you, that was the most painful moment of my life. And I'm not using painful as a descriptor for the physical experience that I just laid out for you. I meant emotionally and spiritually painful. I truly believed I was spending the last second of my life completely disconnected from everything and everyone that had ever meant anything to me. And not because they didn't want to be there for me, but because I made it impossible for them. And I woke up on the floor of my apartment in a puddle of vomit and in a pile of fast food garbage. And over the course of the next hour, I kind of realized what had taken place, and I got flooded with immense relief. And that relief was a really profound experience for me because, as most people look at suicide, I truly thought what I wanted to do was end my life. But the relief that I was experiencing in that moment was all the evidence that I needed to say, there are something or some things about your life that are so important to you, that are so meaningful to you that you're relieved you're still a part of it.
So you had a
There's
near-death experience, basically,
absolutely near
even
death.
though it was caused by yourself, but,
Yep.
like, you had a near-death experience, like, "Oh, whoa, there are things that are important."
And it really spoke to the reality of what suicide is. And I'm going to say this with 100% confidence that there isn't a single person who suicides that does it because they want their life to end. They do it because they want their pain to end. If they could solve their pain with ease and repeatability, they would. Now, a lot of people who seek suicide as a solution are facing things far worse than I am, and so I completely understand why the idea is I've got to do this. I don't have any other way of getting out of it. I can't do another day like this.
Mhm.
But suicide is not someone wanting to end their life. It is someone wanting to end their pain. And so that was kind of this moment where I realized, holy shit, life is not my problem. Life is an incredible thing. I have unbelievable things that I could still be a part of if I choose to really change how I move through the world. It's my relationship to pain that I suck at. I've got to figure out how to do that better. I've got to figure out why do I feel like my life is such a villainous adversarial experience for me. I got to figure out how do I make my relationship with myself, my body, and myself both physically and emotionally feel like a safe place to be instead of a constant battle? How
Mhm.
do I feel like I have people in my life that feel like a safe place to be instead of a constant battle? I got to figure out how do I find a purpose that I can share with people within a community of shared respect that I want to show up and be present for every single day. And I've got to figure out a way so that my future feels like a place I want to be a part of. If I can do that, the pain that I experience for whatever reasons on any given day, whether it's something traumatic that happens or whether it's just, an argument that I have, it won't be a thing that I want to escape. My life won't be something that I want to escape. I'll be willing to say, yeah, you know what? That sadness makes sense.
Mm.
And I'm willing to feel it because, man, tomorrow I am so excited for that. I want to be there for that full, loving, connected life. And I'm willing to be with this, whatever it is right now. I'm willing to have it. I'm willing to figure out how I can go from letting those things cause disorder in my life to helping them make sense in my life. And that's really what the whole journey was about.
Mhm. So you kind of woke up with this desire for purpose,
Absolutely.
and you realized that there were people and things in your life that were valuable. Who were the people in your life that you were like,
Yeah.
these are like these people? I need these people or these people need me, or what was like
Yeah.
what was the
So,
thought?
uh, my dad and we didn't get along when I was in high school, and that's my fault. Um,
It's tough admitting that. It's
it
really tough,
is.
by the way.
It
I just
is.
want to step in and say it's really tough to take responsibility for your parents when you're a kid.
Yeah.
Like it's really hard to do that.
I
So,
never I never had the courage to ask him why he felt he needed to show his love for me through criticism. Maybe that's
mm,
all he knew. I never thought maybe him saying criticizing how I studied, criticizing how my weight, criticizing all these things was a way of saying, I'm afraid things might go poorly for you if things don't change. And you mean the world to me.
mm,
I was very wrapped up in myself and I never asked him that question. And as a result of that, and I'm not saying I should have known how, but I am saying that that's a big factor. As a result of that, my dad and I were adversaries.
mm,
Um, uh, and at the end of my drug addiction, I blamed him for everything. And he never gave up on me.
wow.
He and my mom and my brother and sister, they never once looked at me and said, that's it. That's the last straw. You're done. See you later. In fact, when I survived suicide and realized what had happened, the first thing I did was pick up the phone and I called my dad and I asked for help within the second of him answering. I didn't want a moment to go by because I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to say it. So I asked for help and I said, Dad, I need help. And what he said, I'll never forget. I don't know if this is exactly the way that he said it, but I know what I heard. He said, Adam, I love you. I love you whether you're using or you're not. And I don't know how to do this thing. I don't know how to solve it, but I want to be with you to help you figure it out. I cannot tell you how profound and powerful that statement is because I know this for a fact. Because I've worked with people who are struggling with substance use disorder. I've struggled with substance use disorder. I've worked with people who have mental health disorders. More so, when it comes to the people in our lives that matter, more so than solutions to our problems, we just want to be reminded that we're not going to be forgotten by the people who matter the most to us.
Hmm,
That if we choose to get help, they are not only excited for us, they're saving a place for us within that circle of family, within that circle of friends, that we're not going to let you go and that we're hopeful for you.
mm-hmm,
That is a very powerful, that gives you the permission to then say, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. And it's gotten really bad. And I just need, can we figure this thing out together? So
mm,
my dad, and then to be fair, Rip Esselstyn, who I actually am now very, very close with. And he kind of helped me along with the nutrition aspect through his work and then through some, brief conversations we had together. And now I, have the good fortune of being a lecturer for his retreats. And,
mm,
you know, I'll tell you this, if you were to listen to my entire story, it would sound as if I did the whole thing myself. And that's just fundamentally untrue. The reason why I've been so successful is because I've had a circle of people. When things got bad and I wanted to give up, they asked me to try one more day. They said, I know, listen, if I were going through what you were going through, I'd probably want to give up too. Can you do one more day for me? That is, I'll tell you, substance use disorder, mental illness, it thrives in isolation. It gets its ass kicked if you've got community.
hmm.
And that is a very powerful thing for me. I had an incredible, and I still do have an incredible community.
Wow, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that with me.
Yeah.
That was intense. Give me a minute. um, so there was a stigma. You felt this stigma that if you were to reach out, that it would
Yeah.
make you unworthy of love.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
I already felt, and that's a projection from self, right?
Right.
I felt I was unworthy.
Hmm.
I felt like my body was an adversary, that it had always wanted the worst for me. I felt like people were adversaries. They were always trying to point out the worst in me.
Hmm.
And that's because, I experienced a lot of that. I got bullied really badly. I had communications with my parents that I didn't interpret properly. I had a world that was becoming a very, very isolating place to be. You grow up in a society, in a culture like Western cultures that put on a pedestal a certain persona. Like
Mhm.
if you look like this and you act like this, you're great, and if you don't, you're not.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming the world for that, but it's a part of it.
Mhm.
And so I had been. I'll tell you, it's like recovery is a daily search. It's an act of remembering who you truly are before the world convinced you differently. And I had to start to realize, hey, you know what? I don't know when it happened, but someone got me to believe that my body is actually a problem. When in reality, my body is the greatest physical ally I've ever had in my entire life.
Mm.
Every second of my life, my body has tried to organize itself around health and survival. How can we how can we possibly do the best with whatever you give us? Even if it's a double cheeseburger from McDonald's, what's the best we can do with that? That's literally the body's entire intention is to keep you alive and care for you. My surviving suicide was an ultimate expression of we are never going to quit on you. We have been fighting for you since the day you were born. We're the greatest ally you've ever had. If you could just remember that we are here for you and get into alignment with us, just watch what's possible.
Mhm.
Instead of trying to outcompete my weight, instead of trying to outcompete my diseases, what if I could become a caretaker? Occupy a caretaker role where my job is to lovingly care for a body whose entire intention for existence is to do the best it can for me. Then every act isn't an act of restriction, it's an act of abundance and caregiving. It is an intentional affirmation of recovery. And that's what I use nutrition and movement for, was to finally be an accurate caretaker for my body. And as a result of seeing the transformations that were possible, it sort of became this example of like, hang on a second. I used to think that I got sick because my body was a problem, that I was a genetic mistake or whatever. But really, that was the most appropriate response my body should have to the choices environment that I was living in. What if the same goes for my emotional responses to life? What if my anxiety and depression aren't a pathology? What if they make complete sense? What if they aren't a problem to be corrected? What if they are a signal to be better understood and listened to properly for the first time in my life? And so I approached therapy from that perspective. Instead of trying to insult my signals of anxiety and depression with medication, what if I tried to listen to them safely? That's a very difficult thing to do on your own. And I didn't do it on my own. I was in a lot of therapy. I did about 5 hours of group therapy a day for 3 months.
Wow.
Um, but that's what I figured out how to do. And nutrition was like this example. It's like, guess what? You've never been broken. Everything that's happened to you is the appropriate response to an environment that doesn't suit your needs. Every response that you've had in life is a response to viewing the world around you as something other than what it actually is. That's just a phenomenal opportunity for me.
Mhm. So this is just my interpretation, and maybe you can clarify, but it sounds like, as you're going through all these different, shifting your paradigms, right?
Yes.
Basically questioning the way that you think about things. What was it that you questioned one thing, you realized you had that 30 days and you were like, oh, what if I was that the momentum that
Yeah.
gave you like the ability to start questioning all these other things, or like what
That's
was,
exactly it. Yeah, because
okay.
I was quite a difficult person in therapy for the first 30 days.
Mm.
I hadn't seen a win yet.
So
And
you needed a win.
I needed a win. I needed to see
Mm.
that this effort was actually going to generate something positive in my life. Those first 30 days were really like a series of, weekly experiments with nutrition to see that if I could just change one aspect of my environment and radically change it, which was my caloric environment, what could take place if I was willing to be comfortable being uncomfortable, radically shift my environment in one specific way? Would I respond to that environment with positive change? And that's exactly what happened. That gave me permission to say, hey, guess what? If this kind of change was possible by changing this aspect of your environment, what change is possible if you change other aspects of your environment, your social, your psychological?
Mhm.
That gave me permission to say, this is probably gonna be really hard. But look what happened when I was willing to be comfortable being uncomfortable for those past 30 days. Let's run a new experiment for another
Yeah.
30 days. I never told myself I got to do this for the rest of my life. And I think that actually benefited me.
Yeah.
I said, what I want to do this year is run a series of experiments, short term experiments where I can gain valuable information, valuable data, and suggest, hey, maybe this is actually beneficial for me. It seems like for the first time, I figured out how to care for my body. Seems like for the first time, I figured out how to be safe with feelings. Seems like for the first time, I figured out how to be safe with other people. Let's do it again. I want to
Mhm.
find out if that's true. I'm motivated to find out, is this actually what's happening?
Yeah. So now, like, I mean, you kind of answered my question, but for people who are struggling with whatever it may be, maybe
Yeah.
they're struggling with similar situations with substance abuse, maybe it's maybe it's food addiction,
Yeah.
maybe it's, I don't know, chronic stress of some sort. What are your tips for people to do these little experiments for themselves? Do
Yeah.
you have, like, I don't know if you have, the Adam Sud framework for
Yeah.
experimenting on yourself, but like what are some guidelines you can give people?
So, first and foremost, if you're a person who's dealing with that sort of end stage disordered experience where whatever you're struggling with has become so overwhelming that it's disordered your ability to show up and live life in a healthy way, the most important thing you can do is call a professional, find out what is the next most necessary step for you. Maybe it's a treatment facility, maybe it's an intensive outpatient facility, maybe it's a partial hospitalization program. That is the most important thing, is to actually talk to someone who can assess what's going on in your life and give you the first most important step for care. That's number one. If you're that person who's past that stage and you're really trying to figure out how do I do this, or if you're a person who hasn't gotten to that stage and you want to correct the trajectory of your life right now, I find that one of the most valuable things is understanding, why does it make sense that you're struggling with what you're struggling with? Why is it not an indication of you being a weak person who lacks discipline and willpower? Why is it the appropriate psychological and biological response that you're having to a life that feels too hard?
Is
That
this
is
is this kind of Rip Epplestein? Is this
this
his?
is this is rooted in Doug Lyle's work.
Doug Lyle? Okay.
The He wrote a book called The Pleasure Trap,
The Pleasure Trap.
and he
Okay,
gave a
cool.
TED talk by the same name. He has a website called Esteem Dynamics that really talks about evolutionary psychology and why it is that humans behave the way that we do.
Mhm.
And I'll actually give you an example of this. This is really interesting. So when we talk about substance use, when we talk about food or drugs or even sex and gambling, what we're talking about is a dopamine response. And I know dopamine gets thrown around as this kind of buzzword of like, oh, don't do anything that triggers dopamine. No, 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 no. That's never going to take place. Dopamine is a phenomenal neurotransmitter. It is a unique pleasure chemical, meaning it doesn't just give us the excited euphoria of pleasure, it gives us the sense, it's a reward pleasure chemical. What that reward is about is giving us a feeling that we have statistically increased our likelihood of survival. And I'm going to show you how and why this kind of guidance system helps us figure out how to survive specific environments. So, what's important to understand is that we have spent about 99% of our evolutionary story in a very specific environment. That environment is not the environment that we're living in today. We evolved in an environment of scarcity, competition,
Mhm.
danger, and expense. Okay, so if you and I were to travel back in time 100,000 years ago, we would predate the invention of agriculture. We'd find ourselves in a tribal village. And in fact, that is actually the environment that our psychology and biology does the best with.
Hmm.
It's in a tribe of about 50 to 100 people, where within that tribe, we're in a group of about 10 other people, 5 to 10 other people. That's our clique within the tribe.
Mhm.
And in this tribe, the tribal elder might come up to us and say, hey, Dean, Adam, your job today is to go into that unexplored area of wilderness and find food for us that we can eat and survive on. You and I go, hey, Chief, got you. So, what we're about to do is something very specific. We're about to go into an environment where calories are not guaranteed. And in fact, they're very scarce. And if we don't get to them first, something else might. So, that means that it's an environment of scarcity and
Mhm.
competition. Some of those other organisms that are competing for these calories might be dangerous for us, and the terrain might be dangerous for us. So, now it's scarce, competitive, and dangerous. It's also very expensive biologically. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of energy to do this. So it's scarce, competitive, dangerous, and expensive. So we have to be efficient. And we have to have some kind of mechanism within our psychology and our motivational architecture that helps us to figure out what's the right move to make. We go out into the wilderness and we come into a clearing. And for the sake of this argument, let's just say that these two foods exist next to each other. We see a blueberry bush, right? And we see a plantain tree. And now remember, the tripartite motivational system that drives behavior is pleasure seeking, energy conservation, and pain avoidance. We want to get the most amount of pleasure for the least amount of pain and the least amount of energy. So we look at these options, we see the colors, we know this is food. Because the blueberries are lower to the ground and cost us less energy to gather, we're going to try those first. And because there is calories in blueberries, we're going to get a lift in our dopamine circuitry. That lift in the dopamine circuitry is an indication that this might be a good move to make. Seems like there's calories there, seems like it's going to help us survive till tomorrow. Maybe we should do this. It costs us very little energy to gather them. Great. I start gathering them. And then you look to your right and notice some of the plantains have fallen on the ground, and you pick one up and you bite into it. And in fact, there is about 10 times as many calories per bite. And the lift in the dopamine circuitry is equal to that increase in calories per bite. And you go, hang on a second. Don't spend another moment gathering those. This is clearly the right move to make. Every instinct in you is telling you with unbelievable accuracy, this is a much better choice to make to give us more calories for less time and less energy. We gather them, we bring them back, and we're successful. Okay, that dopamine circuitry was a guidance system that helped us figure out with unbelievable accuracy and unbelievable efficiency what was the right move to make to be successful in environments of scarcity. Mm-hmm. Next thing that happens is we are zapped forward in time to present day. We find ourselves in Times Square. What's happened over the last 100 years is there's been an incredible shift in the caloric environment to where now there are far more calories per bite than have ever existed in human history. And the ease and repeatability and abundance of those choices, it's greater than it's ever been in human history. And our motivational psychology, our motivational architecture has no understanding that the shift has occurred and is still operating and guiding us as if we lived in an environment of scarcity. So we bite into a bag of potato chips or we bite into a cheeseburger. Every instinct in you goes, holy shit, this is fantastic. Mm-hmm. If ever you had the opportunity to do this again, this has to be the right thing to do. How fantastic is this? That dopamine lift goes so far outside the bounds of the normal human experience. You are just lit up. This looks and feels like a very successful thing to do, when in fact, it's self-destructive. Mm. And what happens over the course of time is anytime you expose yourself to a supernormal stimulus, a stimulus that is outside the bounds of the typical human experience, your receptors are going to defend themselves against that intense stimulus. They're going to dull their sensitivity. And so now, in order to get a lift that feels like a normal thing to do, like a healthy thing to do, you have to eat foods that are super rich. You have to eat that McDonald's cheeseburger. You have to eat those potato chips.
You set a higher standard of what
you set a higher standard. Your receptors have defended themselves. They've lowered the bar. And this is about the time when you realize, oh my gosh, I can't seem to stop eating this stuff. I've gained weight. Maybe you're developing some chronic disease conditions. You go, wait a minute, I know what I need to do. I need to start eating healthy again. I need to go back to what is more representative of our natural history and our natural behavior. I need to eat whole, intact foods. And you do it. Mm-hmm. There's less calories per bite in these foods. And what happens? The lift that you feel feels wrong. Mm-hmm. Your entire motivational system has been spun 180 degrees around a problem that you cannot figure out. Every instinct in you has been designed to get the most for the least. But when you do that in the modern environment, you are making choices that fool the system, and you end up into what Doug Lisle calls the pleasure trap, which is when I know this is the right way to go, but this feels like a better decision. I should go through that. I should go this way. He gives a really great example. If you were to go outside at night and you had your porch light on, what you're likely going to notice is that moths are attracted to this light. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is because they are designed by nature to use the brightest lights in the sky. In fact, celestial objects, they're designed to use them for navigation. But when the brightest light in the sky is now your porch light, they get fooled. They hit the light and they flutter down. They hit it again. They hit it again and they hit it again. Eventually, they're going to die. Mm-hmm. And what has happened is by messing with the environment, by introducing a supernormal stimulus, a stimulus that is not supposed to be there, that is not representative of that animal's natural history and natural behavior, that animal now runs the threat of making decisions that it thinks and feels are incredibly successful when in fact it's self-destructive. It is not that animal's fault that it was driven to do that over and over again. the environment was so shifted that every instinct in it was fooled into thinking it was doing something successful when in fact it was self-destructive. That is what we're seeing with drugs, with
Mhm.
alcohol, and food. The environment that we live in is so shifted away from what is healthy for our psychology that our psychology is making motivational decisions, thinking and feeling like it's doing really successful things when in fact it's not.
Mhm.
The solution shouldn't be how do I avoid those foods? The solution should be how do I design a personal environment that looks like the life I want to live so that I can recalibrate my dopamine receptors. In fact, the resensitizing of your dopamine receptors is about a 4-month journey. However, 80% of that journey occurs in the first 2 weeks. If you can just make the choice that looks like the life you want to live, that looks like the healthy choice, if you can do it for 2 weeks, you will make most of the 4-month journey within the first 2 weeks. That is a very valuable thing to understand.
Mm.
So, first, I help people understand why it's actually reasonable that you think and feel like what you're doing is successful when in fact you're self destructing. I think
So
that's
we need to
important.
understand that two things. We need to understand that because of our environment,
Mhm.
it's incredibly difficult for you to do the healthy thing.
It's going to
But
feel very hard.
and then second, because of how easy it is to get those things, there is because of how easy it is to get that's part of it is it's
Yeah,
so easy to get those things that it makes it even harder to do the
that's right.
healthy thing. But also there's nothing wrong with you. This
There's
is how
nothing
your
wrong with you.
biology is supposed to work.
It
So
makes
like
complete sense.
as a society, we tend, whether consciously or subconsciously, we look at people who are, who are participating in substance abuse, who do
Yeah,
have, who are overweight, who have issues. We look at that at this, we're kind of subconsciously kind of programmed to look at those things as this is a character defect. Like there is something wrong with this person.
exactly.
I don't want to associate myself with this
Right.
person because, or I'm less likely to associate myself with this person because they are unhealthy. There is something wrong with them. When in reality, they are doing exactly what their biology is telling them to do. It's not a
There's
character defect.
not
So
a character defect
so
at
the
all.
big part of this is understanding that there's nothing wrong with you. You are doing what your biology wants you to do.
Yeah,
Mm,
you have a psychological and motivational architecture that is designed to seek out the most for the least every single time. When you do that in the modern environment, it's gonna probably lead you in a direction you don't want to go, but you're gonna think and feel like it's a good thing to do.
mhm,
Now, if you take that same person and you put them in a very different environment, like let's say a blue zone, and a blue zone is an area around the world. This was a book written by a man named Dan Buettner. He's a National Geographic explorer. He wanted to reverse engineer longevity. In the 1980s, he set out and he discovered five. They called them blue zones because they circled them on a map with a blue marker when they found one.
mhm,
These are populations around the world that have the highest percentage of centenarians, people who live to be 100 or older,
mhm.
who also have the longest years lived without disability and the lowest rates of chronic disease. And what he found is that every one of these blue zones has four core principles that are exactly the same. Every single one of these blue zones eats a plant predominant diet. They're not vegan, they're not plant exclusive, but a plant predominant diet, meaning they have very high fiber intake, about 50 grams or more per day. Every one of these regions or populations of people move their body every single day. In fact, their villages, their towns are designed in such a way that movement is encouraged and attractive. They also interact in a community every single day. In fact, you have to be a part of it all. You have to be a part of what the goings on of the town around you. And you have to have a belief in something beyond yourself, which doesn't mean God necessarily, but like that you are part of a bigger goings on.
A sense of spirituality.
Sense of spirituality, a sense of being connected to something greater going on. Now, if you were to take any individual and put them in a blue zone, what's going to happen is that environment of that blue zone is so accurately designed to encourage longevity that they will start to experience the effects of it. Their diseases will start to reverse, their body weight might start to come down, their sense of connection will increase, their mood will increase. And you'll go, hang on a second, I thought I was weak. I thought there was something wrong with me. No, the environment you were in
Mm,
was designed unintentionally by you, but designed very well to encourage all of the things you were struggling with. Same thing happens when you take someone from a blue zone and you drop them into Western culture. They start to experience all of the symptoms that a Western environment encourages. And it's not because overnight they lost all their discipline. It's not because overnight they lost all their willpower or all their self-control. It is exactly the response that should happen to an environment that looks exactly like the one that we live in. The reason why you do so well is, if I guarantee you, if I went to your house, it would look like your environment was intentionally organized to suit the life you want to live, and that the options that are counter to that rarely ever make it into your home. They may come in every once in a while. Like, you might have a birthday celebration, you bring home a slice of cake. That might happen every once in a while, but it's rarely going to enter your environment. You have an intentionally cultivated environment that encourages the behaviors you want with ease and repeatability.
Mm-hmm.
That's not coincidence. You're no more disciplined than the person next to you. Your environment is more disciplined than the person next to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you do so well.
Yeah. I think that's an awesome point. And that's willpower is finite, but you can do a lot of things to make it. You can do a lot of things to your environment to make it so that you don't have to rely on willpower. And
Yeah.
that's the big difference. Disciplined people they don't necessarily have more willpower. They have taken more steps to make it so that their environment encourages the activities, the behaviors that they want to do, that they know are going to help them
That
in
is
the long
exactly it. What I'll tell people is, make it easy to do the healing thing.
run.
Instead of trying to become a more disciplined person, design a more disciplined environment. Your
Mm-hmm.
self control will always be less necessary if your environment doesn't require you to depend on it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? If your ability to be successful depends on your opportunity and ability to outcompete your environment,
Mm-hmm.
your success will be short lived.
Yeah.
If your success is a result of how disciplined your environment is, your success will be as long lived as long as you live in that environment.
Yeah. Yeah. These are really familiar concepts to me because of certain books that I've read. Like I'm really big into behavioral science. I haven't read that Lyle book yet, so
Oh, it'll blow your mind. You'll love it.
I
Yeah,
need to
you'll
read
absolutely
that.
love it.
But like the ones that I read, these certain books on repeat. Like I read Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg.
BJ Fogg.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I read that like
And Atomic Habits. Atomic Habits is
Atomic
rooted
Habits, the other one. Yep.
that is rooted in evolutionary psychology. That
Yeah.
is rooted in the idea that it is actually the environment that encourages the personality to have new habits. Right?
Mm-hmm.
He lays out the formula that habits are a function of a personality plus its environment.
Yeah.
That if you change the environment, the personality's pathways will change.
Mm-hmm.
That it is far less a result of that person changing, much more a result of that person changing the environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So those are I'm gonna have to dig into those other books, but yeah, Atomic Habits is another one. Those are the two I recommend.
Atomic Habits has been on the New York Times bestseller list for, I think, the past 2
I think
years straight.
it sold like 20 million copies or
It
something
is
insane,
one of the
insane like
best
that.
books I've ever read on the science of habit change.
Yeah.
It's incredibly valuable.
Yeah. I mean, like literally every other sentence, you're like, I need to underline that.
I
I need
know,
to underline
I
that.
know,
I need
right?
to underline
By the
that.
time you're done, you've highlighted the entire book.
Yeah, he's an amazing James Clear is an amazing
Yeah,
writer. He's just really good
it's
at
very
doing
good.
that. So I know we started this talking about I wanted to talk about a a vegan diet, but
Yeah.
I'm realizing now we just are not going to have time to do that. Um,
Well, I'd
so
gladly come back and talk about that.
perfect. We'll come back
Yeah.
on and do that. But there are still more questions that I want to have.
Yeah.
One really big question that I want to ask because you may not be going through substance abuse or you may not be on a self-destructive path, but there is a very good chance that you see somebody who is someone
Yeah.
who you love is on a self-destructive path. And as somebody who has been there, I want to know what are the things that people do well intentioned but make it worse.
Yeah. You know, number one, if you're witnessing someone who is struggling with substance use disorder or struggling with, some kind of behavioral health disorder, I understand why this question that I'm about to suggest seems like a valuable question to ask that person. What you're going to want to ask that person is, how do we get you to stop? I know that seems like a valuable question to ask. It's actually really not. In fact, it's actually quite harmful, because it's important to understand that from that person who's struggling, from their perspective, their use is what makes their life tolerable. Their use is what gives their life on a day-to-day basis the slightest sense of safety and survivability. To suggest that what they need to do is remove that from their life is a very terrifying and potentially harmful thing to suggest to that person.
Mm.
Of course, you don't want them to continue doing it. You understand the trajectory that takes place as a result of their continued use. You know that in 5 to 10 years, this is going to have dire consequences. It's an extraordinary thing that this person is going through. But to them, what they're trying to do is care for their pain, to soothe the passage of time and relieve their ability of being present in their life. The reason why they don't mind that it has consequences in 10 years is because at this point in time, their future isn't a place they want to be a part of anyways.
Mm.
What you want to say to this person, a much more valuable question is, how can we figure out why your use makes sense? How can we help you figure out why for you, your use is a very reasonable psychological and biological compulsion? Why, for you, does it look and feel like self care? That's the internal question that I want you to start to occupy if you're witnessing somebody.
Mm-hmm.
If this person could do it differently with ease and repeatability, if they could overnight reconnect their life to a life that feels safe and secure without the need of substances, they would do it. They would. So understand that. The best thing you can say to this person is, I love you.
Mm.
I love you whether you're using or you're not. I love you whatever state you're in. And if you ever need me, I might be able to help you figure this out, but I'll at least be with you.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very valuable thing to do. Now, of course, you want to assess the risk involved in having them around you. Like, it's not always safe to have that person around. So you can set boundaries. And in fact, it's important to set boundaries. This can be done by phone call. This can be done by text. They don't have to be physically with you if you think they're not a safe person to have around. But to let that person know that it is them that they care about, not their problems that you're worried about solving, is a
Mm.
very valuable thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So letting them know that you love them, and then you're
And
from
say,
from there
I
you're
don't know.
you're
I don't
kind
know
of
how to
getting
solve this.
okay.
I might not know the best thing to do, but I can help you find out what's the next step to take. What's a number to call? What's this, that, or the other?
Mm-hmm.
If you need a ride, I'll call an Uber for you. I'll call an Uber for you to take you to that place. I
Mm-hmm.
will be a person who will care for what is needed in your life. Now,
Mm-hmm.
you might, like I said, if they're not a safe person to be around at that time, or if they're in compromising situations, physically being present with them may not be the right thing to do. But there
Mm-hmm.
are ways to be present for their needs. This is really important. People who are addicts, they're not criminals. They're
Mm-hmm.
humans in pain. People who are struggling with mental illness like depression and anxiety, they're not sick. They're humans in pain. And people who are suicidal are not crazy. They're humans in pain. And maybe if we could stop trying to define and see them by what they struggle with, it will be easier for us to listen to their needs. And then we'll see that all of their needs make complete sense.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to help change the narrative around substance use disorder and mental illness. Instead of seeing it as a personal failing and as a disease process, but see it as a reasonable response to a life this person doesn't want to be a part of, a biological drive to feel safe. And they're doing it in an environment that is fooling their system, that is compelling them to repeat behaviors that look and feel exactly like the right thing to do when in fact they're not.
Mm.
This person does not know why they can't stop doing it, but I guarantee you they want to. If their life could look different, they would do it. That's important.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask this question in I want to try to address, like, let's say we're looking at someone in our life who's like they're living an unhealthy lifestyle, and they're gaining weight, you're
Yeah,
concerned about their long-term health. They're not Maybe they're not substance abusing, maybe they're not
sure.
into, maybe they haven't gone to the extent that you're talking about. Like, walk me through,
Yeah,
how do I talk with somebody who's like, hey, like, you're 40 or 50 pounds overweight, you're not that old right now, but as you get older, you're going to get heavier and heavier. You're living
yeah,
you know, I'm really concerned about you being around in your 50s or your 60s.
yeah.
Like, how do you address that? Like, what's the best way to, express love and support?
So
but
I have
also
never
health.
found like the one right answer to that question, and there's various avenues you could take. For me in my situation, I found that having someone willing to be a participant in your journey with you is a very valuable thing. If you say, "Hey, listen, you don't even have to bring up that they're overweight, but say, "Hey, look, I've decided I want to try for 21 days or 28 days, however long you want to do it, this thing." Whether it's I want to walk 2 miles a day, or
Mhm.
I want every 2 meals a day. I want them to be paleo or plant based or whatever it is. I want to do this thing, and I don't think I can do it alone. I think I need your help to do it.
Mm.
What you're saying is they might be valuable to your life. Will you do this with me? That is a very encouraging, very uplifting offer rather than saying, I see a problem in you that I want to come and fix.
Mhm.
Say, hey, I haven't figured out how to do this. I think if we did it together, I could figure it out. Will you help me? I found that to be very valuable for me in my life when
Mhm.
I've helped other people. When I helped my identical twin brother was about 280 pounds after I got sober, and he had type 2 diabetes. And I said, hey, Bobby, I really want to do this thing. I want to start getting into like CrossFit and stuff in LA, but I can't do it alone. And I really think you might like this lifestyle. Will you come live with me, live my lifestyle, help me do this as well? Uh, Live this plant-based lifestyle with me. He ended up doing it. He reversed his diabetes in 6 weeks. He's lost 100 pounds as of today.
Wow.
But I made it equally about me as it was about him.
Hmm.
I said, I want to help you, reverse diabetes if you'd like to. But I also think it would be great for me if you came and lived with me because I'm early in recovery. I want to keep doing well. And I think both of our lives could get better if we did this together. It was kind of like a mutual offer.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so interesting that our first urge, our first instinct when we want to help somebody is like the wrong way to do it. We're like, this is what you're doing wrong and you need to fix it. Like which is like essentially saying like, it's
Yeah.
exactly what doesn't work. So
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting that like, given I don't know, given our understanding of our biology as this amazing thing and so much of what what developed works really well for certain things, but apparently like our biology did not develop very well when it comes to helping people to because
Well,
like our first instinct is to like let me convince you why you're wrong, like which is like if you try to have an argument with somebody, right? Like that's the worst way to win an argument
it's
is
the
to try and
worst.
convince them they're wrong
You
to
can
get
either be
something.
right or have friends. It's up to you. You
Right.
know.
Like so
So that actually goes back to evolutionary psychology. So if
mhm,
we were to go back to that village setting, and we were in that group of 5 people,
mhm,
subconsciously you have a ranking. We do this today. Subconsciously you have a ranking of all the people in that group, and that ranking is the level of importance and value that they bring to the group, meaning how much do they keep every other one of us alive, how much value and knowledge do they have that's unique to them that keeps everyone else alive longer. So you have a ranking. Like, so if we're in that group, you know this person might think you're a 1, this person thinks you're a 2. I don't know what you did to this guy because he thinks you're a 4, but you must have pissed him off at some point, and this person thinks you're a 3. Okay. Now what happens is this person who's a 4, or this person that thinks you're a 4, you come into the group, you go, guys, guess what I figured out how to do? I figured out how to lose weight and eat more. What's going to happen is that guy who thinks you're a 4 is going to feel real threatened, because what's happening is you might be bringing knowledge to the group that makes everyone else's life better and will raise your status amongst that group to a higher number. If that happens, if something were to happen to the group, like an attack or a weather event, more people are going to spend more of their energy keeping you alive because you're more valuable to the group than everyone else.
mhm,
So the number one thing this person is going to do is he's not going to make you wrong. What he's going to do is he's going to try to make that knowledge look worthless. So he's going to attack that knowledge. Oh, but what about this? Or, oh, what about, they don't want to know. They're just needed to make it look like this knowledge that might threaten the order is worthless to everyone else. If they do that, they maintain that status. They
mm,
maintain. So that is what happens when someone comes in and they go, hey, listen, I've been doing this thing and I've lost 50 pounds. You should do it. Someone at the table is going to go, well, that's dangerous. or that's dumb, or what about this, or I heard
Mm.
lectins, or I heard blah, 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 blah. They don't care. There is a subconscious drive to maintain a sense of psychological and physical status within the group. And that's what they're defending against. So the best thing you can do is say, hey, guess what? I don't really know if this is going to work, but I heard about this thing and it seems to make a little bit of sense. And I want to try it. I
Mhm.
don't think I can do it alone. I think I need you to do it. You're
Mm.
now giving status to that person across the table who you're actually trying to help. You're giving them status amongst the group and saying, if you don't help me, I might not be able to do it. They want to demonstrate to the group that, yeah, in fact, they're the person who can make it possible. They're
Mm.
going to have a psychological drive to prove you right. That's a valuable thing to take advantage of.
Cool. So instead of saying, "Hey, you've got an issue, we want to fix it," you say, "Hey, like, I'm really busy during the day. I want to start walking more, but I don't think I could do it alone if I didn't have some accountability. So,
Yeah.
will you do this walking thing with me? I'm gonna
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Because
go for
I
like
don't think I can
5,000
do it.
steps a day."
Because I don't think I can do it unless you help me. If
Mm.
you say, hey, guess what? I noticed you're gaining weight. It's probably because you're not walking enough. What's happening is their sense of status is being threatened. And so they're going to defend themselves by making your offer look stupid. They're going to go, that's ridiculous. It's not because I'm not walking. I like it like this. This is how I choose to live my life.
Mm.
I'm completely fine. There's nothing wrong with me. How dare you threaten my status?
Mm.
That's what they're going to defend against.
Hmm. Okay. That's really good to know. I think most of us can. So, I mean, gosh, I was thinking of a stupid plug for manful yoga by saying like, hey, like, invite your friends to do manful yoga because you don't
You
think you can do them
should.
alone.
It's a great
But
plug for
like,
you. Say, hey, look, I don't
or
really know
any
about.
type of fitness.
No, but
I
think
try
about
not
it.
to promote manful yoga like to whatever, but like any workout you want to do, like get your friend involved if you
I'll
want
tell you,
something
there's
healthier.
two phrases that can actually be very convincing. It seems and for now. I'll use it. I'll use it in this example of man flow
It
yoga.
seems and for now.
Hey, so listen, I heard about this thing called man flow yoga. I don't really know if it's any good. I don't know if there's any value. Seems like it might be beneficial though. It seems means you're not convinced. And for now, I'd really like to give it a try. Means you have no intention of doing this for the long term. Would you? I don't think I could do it without someone. I think I need your help. Would you like to go? Let's just go find out if this thing is actually any good.
Hmm.
What you're saying is, I'm not here to threaten your lifestyle by saying, if you don't do manflow yoga, you're not doing life right. In fact, you're questioning the validity of manflow yoga. You're asking this
Mm.
person to come and see, is this thing actually valuable? They're more likely to go with you if you have a sense that this, you're not really sure about it.
Hmm.
Seems like it might be a good idea. Not really sure. Want to try this for now. They'll come with you.
Yeah. I'm thinking of so my dad gave me this example, but he had an executive meeting. He's an oncologist at the Cleveland Clinic. He's vice chair of operations there.
Oh,
So
he
he's
probably knows Caldwell Esselstyn, Rip's dad, because he was the
oh
cardiologist at the Cleveland Clinic.
oh wow,
He's,
okay.
he's retired for a while now, but I guarantee you he knows who he is.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
yeah.
probably does. And he told me about an executive meeting they had where his boss came in and she didn't show them a video and say, "This video is important. You guys need to watch it." And like, let's do some. She brought up a video and she said, "Hey, like, I saw this video. I'm not really sure what I think about it. I want you guys to watch it with me and let's talk
Yes,
about it."
she went in and said, I'm
She
not
did
here to show you the right way to do it. She said, I saw this thing, not sure about it, seems interesting. Let's look at it together.
the
Everyone,
ninja the ninja what's it called, like the ninja technique, right? In Tiny Habits he talks about
yes,
like this is like the ninja way to do it.
yes,
Instead of being the group leader, you come in and you implant the seed.
exactly right. You give
Mm.
everyone else the opportunity to say, you might be the one who could figure out why this is valuable because I'm not sure about it. Maybe you're the one who could tell everybody why this is a good thing to do. Then
Hmm.
all the value gets added to you. But really, you just want the group to do better.
Hmm.
Your intention is not to be the one who's the rightest person in the room,
Hmm.
but to be helpful.
Will people eventually start getting suspicious of you if you
No,
do this
because if
all the
they do it
time?
and it adds value to their life, what they're going to want to do is they're going to want to use this new gained value to gain sense of status within other groups.
Hmm.
They're going to likely do, they're going to go, guys, I've been doing this thing. Check this out.
Hmm.
I've lost X amount of weight, or I've added this amount of strength, or I've noticed this, and this. They're
Hmm.
going to own it as something they discovered.
Mhm.
If you can discover value that adds value to the people around you, that is a way to increase your self esteem.
Mhm.
That is a way to go to a group of people and say, seems like I might know how to make things easier and healthier and happier for people. I want people to think of self esteem not as your ego or anything like that, but rather, um, Doug Lisle talks about it as an internal audience.
Mhm.
Your self esteem is an internal audience that is responding to you as if it were the world that you know watching you do what you do. So if you go and do yoga, you do man flow yoga and you lose 10 pounds, you gain strength, you gain mobility, the world goes, holy shit, how did you do that? I've tried yoga before and I couldn't do it for 10 days. You've been doing it for 6 months.
Mhm.
I want to know how you did that.
Mhm.
You now have value to offer the group. And if you offered it to them, if they ever asked of it or asked you for it, you would give it to them with unbelievable accuracy.
Mhm.
It would make their life better and it would raise your sense of esteem within that group. That is how
Mhm.
you raise self-esteem.
Got it. I think it's worth mentioning, as we're saying, like, here's a strategy that you can use to help yourself and help other people. I think it's important to mention that the same principles of change apply here as they do to if you want to implement change yourself. So you need to make
Absolutely.
sure that it's relatively easy enough to do. You want to make sure that like it's something that they actually will want to do. And it should be a short-term thing, right? It should be
Yes,
something like, hey, I want to try this little thing for 14 days. It's not,
exactly.
hey, I want to change my life forever.
No, no.
I'm gonna start working out every day. I'm gonna eat 3 vegan meals every day. I'm gonna
Yeah,
meditate
exactly.
every night. Will you join me? Like, no,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah, no,
busy.
in fact, your brain can't conceptualize beyond about 4 weeks. So if I was to say
For
to
four
you,
weeks.
yeah, so if I was to
Okay.
say to you, hey, I need you to eat a plant-based diet for the rest of your life. What's happening inside of your mind is your mind is trying to conceptualize the time, energy, and resources necessary to complete that task, and it can't. So it's getting pretty frustrated. But if I was to say to you, hey, I want you to eat oatmeal every morning for the next 7 days, what's
Hmm.
happening is your brain is like, okay, that's probably like a container of oats. Probably takes like 10 minutes to make oatmeal every morning. I know what I could add to it to make it enjoyable. And we can do that.
Hmm.
Now it's safe.
Yeah.
That is a much more valuable way to approach change, is to say, even if it's change you're looking to do for yourself, not sure if this is going to work out in the long term. Let me do this thing for the next 7 to 14 days and see what opportunity is possible if this is a part of my behavior pattern. I'm just going to add this little bit this time. Then I'll run the experiment again with another additional change that's easy to do and easily repeatable. And then over the course of time, you're going to get a sense that says, seems like I might have figured this thing out. Seems like this way of doing it might make my life a little bit more enjoyable, a little bit more easy, a little bit more safe and secure and hopeful. Let's keep going. Let's just keep this experiment going.
Hmm. Yeah. I think those are awesome tips. Those are going to be really helpful for people. All right, so we're going to have to come back to do the actual discussion on veganism.
Let's do that.
Um,
That'll be great.
but I do want to do our part two rapid fire
Let's go.
questions. Sweet. Also, like this is one of the best interviews I've had in a long time. So
Oh,
I,
man,
I
I
hope that
appreciate that.
I hope that people get a lot out of this, and in particular, I think the behavior change and also the tips on how to like ask other people to join with you are going to be
Thank
super
you.
helpful. Um, all right, what do you think is one habit, belief, or mindset that has helped you the most in terms of your overall happiness?
Small incremental changes to my environment.
Hmm. Okay, that is a great answer, and it's unique. What is one thing that you do for your health that you think is overlooked or undervalued by others?
Simplicity. I
Simplicity.
am not going out trying to purchase elaborate, intricate, and specialized opportunities to purchase my health back.
Hmm.
I'm making simple, specific changes to my environment that encourage health over time.
Mm. What's the most important activity you regularly do for your overall stress management?
Love my wife.
Okay, good answer. What is the most stressful part of your day to day life?
Most stressful part of my day to day life is feeling like there's never enough time to do the things I love the most.
Mm, yeah, I hear that. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing men and their well being right now?
Okay. I really think that the biggest challenge facing men and their ability to be well is the belief that they have to have it figured out alone.
Hmm.
I think men, just like women, are very much tribal creatures. We need a group. We need our brotherhood. We need a community to figure things out. And there's nothing that removes your manhood by saying, I figured it out with that person.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Okay. Do you want to go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that we've been sold a societal story that you got to figure it out on your own, that men don't ask for help.
Okay.
We'll figure it out. No, I got this. I
Yeah.
got it. Don't worry. I can deal with it. I can take care of it. I'll figure it out. No, no, no,
Well,
no.
well,
Why?
thank
Why?
God we have Google now. Geez,
Yeah,
it
I
must have been really
know.
hard 20 years ago. Like,
but
what do I look up?
but my feeling is, man, if you don't have to do it alone, why would you?
Hmm.
If you could figure this out with the support of somebody who truly wants you to see you do well, has your best interest at heart, there is nothing that makes you less of a man.
Hmm. Yeah. And as we talked about today, when you do need help with something, that's an opportunity to connect with other people. Like,
Yeah,
there's an opportunity there.
yeah. I'll tell you, there is power in acceptance, there is strength in forgiveness, and there is unbelievable potential when we can lay our egos aside and realize how much strength it takes to actually ask for help.
Hmm. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Amazing conversation. I know that I will direct people to go follow you on Instagram, but where
Great.
else can people keep up with you and what you're doing?
Yeah, I have a website, adamsud.com. I've got interviews on there if you want to see some older interviews. You can read about my research study investigating the effects of nutrition on addiction recovery outcomes. And you can book me as a speaker. You can look into my consulting services. And yeah, so my Instagram, plant-based addict, my website, adamsud.com.
Cool. And yeah, I think next time we're gonna have to talk about some of your consulting, because that seems really impressive.
It's
At
pretty cool
least
stuff.
when you mentioned me, seemed pretty cool. So,
You know,
all right, man. Wow, amazing interview. Thank you so much for joining me. It was awesome.
my pleasure.
Guys, if you're listening, I hope this inspires you to be a better man, and I hope to see you on another episode soon. If you like that episode, check out this other one right here. I think you're really going to enjoy it. If you haven't subscribed, click this subscribe button over here, and you can listen to the full episodes on any major podcasting platform. Full details below in the description.